Hello and welcome to Public Report. I'm Jackie Cullimer, your host. With us today is Meg Steinley. She is a project coordinator, and Amanda Bagan. She is also a project coordinator with the Children's Health Alliance of Wisconsin. Our issue is family, and our topic is grieving the loss of an infant. Well, Meg and Amanda, thank you both very much for being with us today.
No problem. Thank you for having us.
So Meg, we'll start with you. Why don't you tell us about yourself and your work with the Health Alliance?
No problem. I am the, as you said, project coordinator for the Infant Death Center of Wisconsin, which is one of the initiatives with the Children's Health Alliance of Wisconsin. And I came to this work because I'm very passionate about working with families and helping them kind of cope with what is pretty devastating loss in their lives.
And I'm Amanda Bagan. I'm a project coordinator for injury prevention and death review at the Children's Health Alliance, and I work closely with Meg. My role at the Alliance is to bring together community partners around a table when a child unexpectedly dies in a community. And our goal is to talk about what happened and how to prevent that in the future.
Now, what is the Infant Death Center and its mission?
The mission of the Infant Death Center is to ensure that every Wisconsin family that's touched by this kind of a devastating loss receive the grief and bereavement supports that they need to help them be successful. The Alliance, or the Infant Death Center, like I said, is one of 7 initiatives with the Health Alliance, and we really help the parents get connected to those services. We want to make sure that they're getting that grief support that they need. We have the ability to connect them with a pediatric pathologist who can maybe help them walk through some of that medical terminology and find out maybe what happened so that they can understand it better. And we publish a newsletter called The Healing Hearts. We do that 3 times per year, and that has articles in it of interest, maybe poems that will be reflective for families to just kind of read through, and that will be another way to support them. And all of our services are free.
Amanda, can you tell us how families are affected by the death of an infant?
Sure. So as you can imagine, this kind of loss, the loss of an infant, is devastating. Dr. William Perloff was our former chair of the Wisconsin State Child Death Review Team, and he said, "Nothing compares to the sadness, the sense of loss, the unfulfilled promise. It reverses the natural order and challenges our belief of a universal good." So children are not supposed to die before their parents, and parents are often shocked, in disbelief. Sometimes the causes are determined and sometimes they are not, and that can be very difficult for a family.
May, can you tell us, why do you offer access to the pediatric pathologist? I know you brought that up before, but why is it important?
Well, I think that, you know, when families are engaged with or having that conversation with the medical examiner or coroner, kind of giving them that kind of final cause of death, they often have a lot of questions, and as you can imagine, an autopsy report is going to be full of medical terminology. And to really kind of, you know, most of us don't understand some of what that terminology is. So the goal is to help families really understand exactly what it means, to help them know about if there's something else that could happen down the road with another child, that kind of thing. So we just want to make sure that they get all of their questions answered in relationship to that medical piece and why things happened.
Can you talk about the Wisconsin Stillbirth Services Program?
Sure.
And why you collaborate with them?
Sure. The Wisconsin Stillbirth Services Program is actually run out of the Marshfield Clinic. Again, they also offer free services. After the consultation with the pediatric pathologist, if there's really more questions than they got answers, this is another avenue for a family that has had a baby with a stillbirth to connect with a geneticist who can do some additional testing and maybe find out through that testing if something can be named or not. Our data is showing, though, that only 30% of the stillbirths that occur get an answer, which means that 70% don't, which is a tough answer sometimes for families to know about. But for those that do find out, it's something that they can plan for as to whether they would have other children or not.
Amanda, is grief different for a parent that loses an infant?
As we mentioned earlier, losing a child, no matter what the age, is extremely difficult. But parents might feel differently about losing an infant because they would lose out on a lot of those milestones that their child would have reached. So their first birthday, or their graduation, or their wedding. So all of those things that they are also grieving in addition to the loss of their child.
Now, what age groups of the infant are we referring to?
Up until their first birthday.
Meg, can it be a difficult time not only for the parents but also for grandparents and siblings?
Yes, for grandparents, they actually kind of get a double whammy, if you will. I mean, they are grieving along with their child, their son or their daughter that lost that infant. That alone is difficult, but then they are also grieving the loss of their grandchild. You know, somebody that they would hope to, nurture and love and probably spoil. It's sort of that loss of a generation for a family. So I think that that's really a struggle in both of those regards. As far as siblings, they grieve differently than an adult would because of their developmental levels. So we want to make sure that we are providing support for the siblings at what they can understand. So we think about often maybe a 3 or 4-year-old who wants to know when Susie's coming back. They don't quite get the finality of that. But also for an older child, so maybe a teenager, maybe struggling with sort of that whole worldview and what does this mean for me, and my brother or sister died and I'll never get to know them. So they question. There's a lot of questioning. So we want to make sure that we share information to support them through referring to support groups or that kind of thing.
Well, even a 3-year-old could also understand that the sadness that's probably in the house at that time is something that's affecting the whole family.
Right. And sometimes they are worried that they did something to cause this to happen. Clearly, that's the role of the parents to help them, reassure them that in fact is not the case.
So, Amanda, do parents often feel alone?
I think initially families feel like they are alone, but once they learn about the support that's available in a lot of our communities across the state, they realize that they are not. And that's a sad reality, but also a welcomed one for our families, so that they understand that there are others who have gone through the same tragedy. One mom at a recent training that we were at for professionals mentioned a quote from a book called An Orphan's Tale by J. Neugebauer, and he said, "A wife who loses a husband is called a widow. A husband who loses a wife is called a widower. A child who loses a parent is called an orphan, but there's no word for a parent who loses a child. That's how awful the loss is." And I think that quote speaks volumes about what a parent is going through and how they could feel alone in that situation. And that resonated with that person in a way to frame around this very difficult topic.
What supports are available for them?
Sure. So every person, like we've mentioned, grieves differently for a variety of reasons. And it will be really up to the person to determine what support and resources they would like to utilize. The Infant Death Center offers contact with the family with a letter initially to reach out a short time after the death and just let them know that we are available and that we can help connect them with services. After that, we follow up with a phone call a few months later just to make sure that they're also, that they have connected with services, or making sure that they are receiving the information that they need. Some families do really well talking with their other family and friends and using them as support, but others feel that they do need some additional counseling that could come from a professional or even the group of a support group.
So how does that help them in a support group when they're talking to other families that have gone through this?
I think that alone can help them realize that they're not alone in this instance, and that families can lean on each other and learn from each other's experiences on how they've handled it.
Why do you also work with professionals who serve grieving families?
We're all human beings, so if we're with somebody or talking to people that have suffered this much from a loss, it can take a toll on everybody. And in order to be, as we know, we have to feel good emotionally, physically, ourselves to do good work. So in order for us to be good providers of service to families, or any professional that's working with families that have lost an infant, they really need to be aware of that. So our goal is to help them learn about and practice what we call self-care. So self-care is taking that time to maybe step back, or to listen to the words of a colleague that might be saying, hey, are you having a bad day today? To know that they might need to step back and take some time off, or just a few minutes even sometimes, to listen to music or go for a walk, or do other things that are going to help kind of center them and calm them down, so that they really are aware of how they are interacting with people, and that they're starting to feel better, so that they can continue to do the work that they do. It's just a really critical thing that we are all in a good space when we're working with families who grieve, because we don't want to kind of put our negative maybe on that, on that situation. We want to make sure that we're there in a supportive role.
Have you been able to see families go through the grieving process and through it to the other side?
Yes. The one thing about losing an infant, or really a child, because that's sort of against the whole course of nature, we don't like to see that. It is a huge struggle. And most families do get through that. That's why we, as the Infant Death Center, want to make sure that families are getting the support they need. We want to know that they have a family network or a friend network that can support them. We want to make sure that they are maybe getting connected with those professionals, counselors, to help them, or to get connected with support group, whether it's a face-to-face support group, or whether it's a Facebook group, or other online supports, just to make sure that they are finding their way. It takes time, as we know. I've lost 2 parents, but that's not the same thing. But it's a journey. It really is a journey. People respond to it differently, depending on their culture or their, religious beliefs. Some are very formal and have these very ritualized processes when somebody dies that they go through, and others look at it as, it's just sort of the natural course of life, and we just keep moving on. So it just sort of depends on that process. Now, we follow families for about a year. If somebody feels like they need to still stay in touch, that's fine. But we want to make sure that they're feeling like they can do this. We do whatever we can to help them along that way. Families do make it to the other side. The length of time that it takes to get there is very dependent. We don't know how long that is for anybody. We can't say it's going to be a year, it's going to be 2 years, it's going to be 10 years. But they do. But the one thing that we have to remember is that they never forget. They really don't. Most of the families that I've talked to just say, I have 5 children, and one of my children is an angel in heaven. So we want to make sure that we respect that, and that we support them in the fact that they, in fact, did have 5 children. I did want to share a quote from a mom that I had some engagement with, and she just said this so well, so I want to make sure that I share this and that I read what she wrote. I believe a loss like this is something I will grieve forever. The process has changed a bit along the way. The intensity is still surprising, but it no longer consumes my life. There was a time when I did not think that was possible. I survived. I continue to survive. Others helped me in ways they never even realized. Some still do. I hope I can continue to pay those kindnesses forward. So she really followed that path on her own time and on her own terms. And this is something that she shared with me, and this is, I think she said, 13 years after the death of her daughter, who died shortly after birth. So it's a hard thing, but most families do make it.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you for having us.
We've been speaking with Meg Steinley. She is a project coordinator, and also Amanda Bagan. She is a project coordinator also with the Children's Health Alliance of Wisconsin. Our issue has been family, and our topic, grieving the loss of an infant. Thank you very much for watching Public Report.
The material on this program does not necessarily reflect the views of WWRS.